Indiana Newsdesk is made possible in part by Smithville Fiber Internet, streaming TV, home security and automation in Southern Indiana. More information at smithville.com. MALLOR GRODNER attorneys providing legal services to clients and the community. Understanding, expertise, results. Bloomington and Indianapolis. LawMG.com. IU Alumni Association connecting IU's network of alumni and sharing the Indiana spirit through scholarships, advocacy, and volunteerism. Alumni.iu.edu. IU Center for Rural Engagement extending IU Bloomington resources to improve Hoosier lives in partnership with communities and organizations. Rural.indiana.edu. And by WTIU members. Thank you.
Coming up on Indiana Newsdesk. A decision to lower the state's age requirement to receive the COVID-19 vaccine has been pushed back because of winter storms this week.
We have experienced delays in vaccine shipments due to the bad weather. We have not yet received our Moderna vaccines for this week.
Ahead, more on the vaccine and plans to deliver it to homebound Hoosiers. Legislation that would expand the eligibility of state-funded private school vouchers for families passed out of the House this week. But former state superintendents argue the bill would divert funds from public education.
We're in the throes of a pandemic which challenges technology, teaching techniques, student and parent support.
And we visit an airport in Seymour that was a training ground for the history-making Tuskegee Airmen during World War II. Those stories and the latest news headlines from around the state right now on Indiana Newsdesk. Welcome to Indiana Newsdesk. I'm Joe Wren. Indiana state health officials say cancellations because of the recent snowstorms have caused a delay in expanding eligibility for the COVID-19 vaccine. More than 43,000 vaccination appointments were impacted by the severe weather this week. The state has also experienced delays in getting its shipment of the vaccine due to the bad weather and has yet to receive its allotment of the Moderna vaccine. Now that means the state won't be opening eligibility to Hoosiers age 60 and older this week.
Vaccine will continue to remain a precious resource for some time, but we are confident that our approach will protect those who are most vulnerable and put Indiana in a strong position to emerge from this pandemic.
Now, Weaver expects the state to lower the minimum age to get the vaccine to 60 next week. Indiana's COVID-19 numbers continue to trend downward. Total hospitalizations have fallen below 1,000 for the first time since October, and the state has recorded fewer than 1,000 new positive tests every day this week. Indiana reported just 29 new deaths on Thursday. All but 2 Indiana counties are in the blue or yellow range, which means 7-day positivity rates of less than 9%. The state's overall 7-day positivity rate, 4.5%.
This is all positive news. We continue to move in the right direction, but please, please continue to wear your masks, stay socially distanced, and stay home when you're sick, and get tested.
The state has reported more than 12,000 deaths from COVID-19, including both confirmed and clinically diagnosed deaths since the pandemic began. Well, there are many in the state who are eligible to get the COVID-19 vaccination but can't get to a vaccination site. Pat Bean reports on a program that takes the vaccine to homebound Hoosiers.
There are now almost 400 sites around the state for eligible individuals to receive the COVID-19 vaccine. But just getting to a site can be an issue for some Hoosiers.
Many of our people are not mobile. They're non-ambulatory. They're on a walker, they're on crutches, they're in a wheelchair. So they may have some difficulty getting into a site to get that vaccine.
That's where the state's Homebound Hoosier Portal project comes in. The portal is a place for area agencies on aging to enroll persons they've identified who meet certain criteria to have the vaccine administered in their homes.
It's kind of a natural progression to partner with the area agencies because we already know a lot of people in our community that might have difficulty getting the vaccine and are in those priority demographics to get the vaccine first.
The project partners with local emergency medical service companies who also have access to the portal. At the end of the day, the EMS company will gather unused vaccines from local clinics and contact those in the portal to coordinate in-home vaccinations. Thrive Alliance, the agency on aging based in Columbus, went live with the program on Monday and the first in-home vaccination in that area was administered that afternoon. The Area 10 Agency on Aging, which serves Monroe and Owen counties, has registered almost 50 individuals in the portal, but neither county has enacted the program yet. Romer has been told Monroe County will utilize the fire department's EMS when the program is up and running, but she has been given no timetable by the county of when that will be. The agency is maintaining contact with the persons in the portal in the meantime.
If they end up getting a call from one of those EMS providers stating, we have a vaccine dose, could we come by and vaccinate you this evening? Then we can get that feedback and kind of know that it's really kicked off and it's actually in play.
To qualify for the portal, individuals must meet 2 established criteria. First, the individual must need special transportation or the assistance of another person to leave their home, or they have a medical condition that makes leaving home an issue. If the person meets either of those, they must also meet both of the second criteria: a normal inability to leave the home, and leaving home must require a considerable effort. The area agencies on aging are go-tos for older Hoosiers, and with a minimum age of 65 to get the vaccine, agencies such as Area 10 and Thrive Alliance were there to help.
And we did take a lot of calls initially to get people registered, and then we just kept an ongoing list on who needed, an in-home vaccine for this.
Thrive is the agency on aging for Area 11, which includes Bartholomew, Brown, Decatur, Jackson, and Jennings counties. Lamborn says Thrive Alliance has been busy helping get older Hoosiers set up to get the vaccine.
The first 6 days that we were taking calls, we took over 650 calls for people wanting to get a vaccination. And that was either in-home or to a walk-in clinic if there was one available.
And while homebound Hoosiers do not come in contact with as many possible infection points, getting them vaccinated against the coronavirus remains important.
If they are aged and disabled, homebound, they need people to come to them to provide care. And so if they're vaccinated, then that can help, protect them in the event that, someone that's coming to help them, might be someone that's a carrier.
Romer is eager to get the program up and running in Area 10.
So yeah, it's going to be wonderful to connect with some community partners to get those vaccines in the home.
For Indiana Newsdesk, I'm Pat Bean.
To register for the vaccine, go to rshot.in.gov, call 211 or your local area agency on aging. The president of the Newfields Art Campus in Indianapolis resigned Wednesday after outrage over the wording in a job description. As George Hale reports, Charles Venable's departure comes after dozens of staff members at Newfields and the Indianapolis Museum of Art began circulating a petition calling for him to leave.
The petition followed a job posting for a new museum director position that referenced maintaining the Indianapolis Museum of Art's, quote, core white art audience. It has since been changed to say the museum seeks to welcome and embrace a more diverse audience while maintaining its traditional core art audience.
That is very unique to the institution. Like there's not a real finger, on the pulse of what is happening, in the broader art world, in the broader American society, even in Indianapolis as a city, when it comes to issues, around race or anti-racism, white supremacy, those kinds of things.
Morgan says she left in 2020 over what she called a toxic culture that alienated people of color and ignored their concerns. She says the problem is leadership. Even before the latest controversy erupted on social media, she was hearing from former colleagues who raised objections to the description.
That's the other thing. It's like staff has been pushing against this stuff internally for years.
On Saturday, the institution expressed regret for the job listing, saying, quote, "It will be our challenge for years to continue building our diversity, equity, and inclusion." Newfields officials initially said that their intention was to emphasize the museum's ambition of growing non-white audiences without alienating its present white visitors.
The whole idea, like first, just starting at the root of this thing, right? Like the whole idea that being inclusive somehow excludes your white audience. One is racist in and of itself. Two, it assumes that your white audience is also racist.
The Board of Trustees and Governors on Wednesday said that an independent committee would conduct a review of its leadership, culture, and boards. For WTIU News, I'm George Hale.
Now, officials there also say they'll expand exhibitions and programming for and by Black and other marginalized communities and conduct anti-racism training. Well, planners are narrowing down a list of 4 potential routes linking southern Indiana to central Indiana in what's being called the Mid-States Corridor Project. As Adam Pinsker reports, they expect to identify a preferred route this fall.
Just a few hours south of the hustle and bustle of Indianapolis, driving through southern Indiana makes for a scenic trip no matter what time of year. But the rolling hills and farmland will be more accessible in the future with the completion of the Mid-States Corridor.
It's travel time, it's logistics, it's connectivity, it's talking about improved connections. And when you have improved connections for both people and goods, it generally leads to more opportunities.
There are 4 potential routes, all of them beginning in the southern Indiana town of Rockport and progressing through Jasper. Each proposed route ends somewhere along I-69 between Washington and Bloomington. The exact spot is up in the air.
The project team expects to identify a preferred corridor this fall.
To reduce costs, the project team eliminated the possibility of constructing a freeway. Instead, they will consider an expressway which has 2 lanes in each direction, or what's called a Super 2.
A Super 2 is at least 1 travel lane in each direction, and then you would have a passing or auxiliary lane or wider shoulder where appropriate throughout that route.
The project team is examining combinations of alignments and considering upgrades to the existing US 231, which already makes up a good chunk of the proposed routes. Mid-States Corridor officials plan to hold public hearings this fall to discuss the preferred route.
Even when we have a preferred corridor this fall, as I said, there's more work to do. Tier 2 environmental studies will follow. Those are much more detailed, and those will identify the specific alignments within that preferred corridor.
It could take 2 years to finish the Tier 2 study. Before any construction can begin, the federal government has to sign off on the final plans. For Indiana Newsdesk, I'm Adam Pinsker.
Coming up next on Indiana Newsdesk. The Republican-led House passed legislation that would expand eligibility of state-funded private school vouchers. Ahead, what that means for public education. And we visit an airfield in Seymour that was a training site for the Tuskegee Airmen during World War II. These stories and more right here on Indiana Newsdesk.
Stay close to Indiana Newsdesk as we trace education issues all the way from the Capitol to your child's classroom. So many topics that arise each year in the State House affect what happens every day in the schoolhouse. The WTIU News Team is committed to helping you stay up to date with the issues that affect your family's future. Keep yourself informed. Tune in to Indiana Newsdesk, your source for regional and state in-depth news.
Ready to watch the best of PBS anytime, anywhere, on nearly any device? It's easy with the PBS Video app. Simply download the PBS Video app on your mobile or streaming device. Now you can watch the latest PBS episodes or catch up on the shows you missed, discover new favorites from PBS, and local content from your PBS station.
Welcome back to Indiana Newsdesk. More than 1/3 of the proposed state funding hike for Indiana schools could go toward the state's private school voucher program under a Republican-backed plan that could boost the program's costs by nearly 50% over the next 2 years. Now, Republicans tout the voucher expansion proposal as giving parents more choices over how to educate their children, while Democrats and other opponents argue that it further drains funding from traditional school districts.
Now is not the time to divert any of our funding from public education, where about 94% of our students are educated. We're in the throes of a pandemic which challenges technology, teaching techniques, student and parent supports, and workforce issues.
The bill is headed to the Senate for further debate. We're joined now by Steve Hennefeld, an adjunct instructor at the Indiana University Media School who writes about K-12 education for the independent site School Matters. Hello, Steve. Thanks so much for being here. School vouchers, again, a hot topic at the State House. Now, proponents of the school choice expansion bill say it gives parents more control over their children's education. Isn't that a good thing?
Well, it's certainly a good thing for parents to be more involved with and more engaged with their children's education. And, to a certain extent, it makes a lot of sense for parents to be making decisions about their children's education. I think there are questions from a policy perspective that you can raise about whether parents should have absolute control over their children's education when it's funded by the public and, thought of as a public good, a public benefit, something that benefits all of us and not just an individual benefit for the parent or the child.
What are some of the issues Democrats have with the bill?
Well, I think, as you mentioned, the cost is really a major issue, that this would eat up about a third, actually more than a third, I think close to 40% of the budgeted increase in funding for schools. It's all one pot of money, and so the more money that's going to private schools through vouchers, the less money that's going to public schools. So that's a big part of it. And then the other part of it is just, I think, the policy question of whether it's appropriate for the state to be funding religious education, private education, that it doesn't really have that much, that's not as accountable to the public. And finally, that this is a benefit that would be going to middle and upper income residents, families, not to low-income families.
We just have a few seconds left. The state school voucher program has been around for a decade. Has it been a success?
It's been a success at helping private schools, most of which are religious schools, helping families who want their children to have a religious education at those particular schools. Academically, not so much so. Research has shown that the students who get vouchers are not doing as well as students who remain in public schools.
All right. Steve, thank you very much for being on the show. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Joe.
Well, tensions flared in the Indiana House chamber Thursday after Republicans booed and heckled Democratic lawmakers who voiced concerns about discrimination in a bill. The legislation would allow a St. Joseph County township to leave the racially diverse South Bend School District for a nearby school district that's overwhelmingly white. An argument ensued outside the chamber, and Indiana Black Legislative Caucus Chair Robin Shackelford says Representative Sean Eberhardt, a Republican, had to be restrained from going after Democrat Vanessa Summers.
So you have tensions flying, but for a member to now take it to a violent situation and look like they're going to hit a member and have to be pulled away from a member, and especially when it's a white male versus a Black female, then we have some serious issues there.
Well, Shackelford said she asked House Speaker Todd Houston last year to require all House lawmakers to undergo implicit bias training and repeated that request to him on Thursday. Well, Governor Eric Holcomb has signed Senate Bill 1 that gives businesses and institutions liability protections from most COVID-19 lawsuits. The bill requires an individual filing a suit to show evidence of gross negligence or willful misconduct. Holcomb says he believes most Hoosier businesses and organizations have been doing the best they can to protect their employees and customers during the pandemic. The law retroactively protects businesses dating back to March of last year and will continue through 2024. The governor's authority to declare disaster emergencies would be restricted under legislation approved by a Senate committee.
So that people don't feel like they were left out or don't feel that they had any input into the orders that affected so many people.
Senator Glick's bill would only allow the governor to declare a widespread emergency for 45 days without the General Assembly getting to weigh in. If the legislature is in session, the emergency could go for 60 days, but after that, only lawmakers could extend the emergency declaration further. The bill also gives the legislature more authority on how to spend federal dollars that come to the state during an emergency. Bloomington City Council is considering an ordinance that would give more protections to people experiencing homelessness. The ordinance would require the city to give a 15-day notice before removing encampments from public parks and spaces and allow people to claim any non-perishable belongings within 60 days of a removal. The measure is in response to the mayor ordering the removal of tents last month from Seminary Park, where people were sleeping. The proposal would also forbid the city from removing any camp if sufficient housing isn't available. We continue our look back on Black history in southern Indiana by turning our attention to Seymour, where the city's connection to the Tuskegee Airmen continues to inspire. Mitch Legan reports.
To Seymour and back, easily, no refueling needed or anything like that.
Tim Molinari always wanted to be a pilot. Growing up in Seymour, he was often at the local airport, where he'd spend hours watching planes fly in.
Every so often, my dad would take me out here and we would check out the planes and just whatever's out on the tarmac or anything like that.
As he grew older, he learned the history of the small airport and was surprised to learn during World War II it was home to an air base and Tuskegee Airmen who set the example for Black Americans fighting segregation right here in Indiana.
I noticed a plaque outside the museum and I realized that that plaque wasn't enough to honor the Tuskegee Airmen. It was good that the plaque was there, but it just really didn't bring out how significant the Tuskegee Airmen were.
For his Eagle Scout project, Molinari constructed a plaza outside the airport honoring the airmen.
I knew it as Freeman Field Army Airfield.
And is now collecting funds to place 2 statues nearby.
Take that bush out and put a statue right there, and then one on this bush, and they would both be life-size statues.
In March of 1945, a Black air unit, the 477th Bombardment Group, arrived at Freeman Field in Seymour to learn to fly large bombers.
In reality, everything was widely segregated, and so no base really wanted these guys.
There, inadequate training continued, and members of the 477th were told not to step foot in the officers' club for supervisors, who were white, and instead use the club for trainees.
Now, this was a thinly veiled attempt to further segregation on base, but Army regulations actually prohibited segregation in military buildings, like the one behind me, and this was something the 477th was aware of.
Some of these guys were combat veterans. They had flown in Europe already. And they didn't want to hear any of this crap about segregation or inferior facilities, so they decided it would be a good idea to integrate the White Officers Club.
Over the course of days, Black soldiers attempted to enter the club and were denied, leading to the arrests of 61 airmen. Base leadership then demanded the soldiers sign an order saying they understood they were not allowed in the club. 101 refused and were arrested.
There's a deliberate calculation taking place here, trading blood for citizenship, right? Service for citizenship. How do you deny basic constitutional rights to people who fought to defend the Constitution?
News of what became known as the Freeman Field Mutiny quickly spread across the country, making the Army look hypocritical at home as it fought for freedom overseas.
Those commanders were replaced. Benjamin Davis was selected, and it became the first time an African American was in charge of a military base in the continental United States.
The mutiny was key in the desegregation of the military, which would occur 3 years later, but it was also one of the earliest and best examples of African Americans using nonviolent protest in their fight for racial justice.
Freeman Field Mutiny was an example of nonviolent protest that became a model for the civil rights movements in the 50s and 60s.
Now that many airmen are no longer with us, Duval is working to keep their legacy alive and highlight the heroes' deep ties to the Hoosier state.
This isn't a matter about what someone else did wrong. This was a matter of what the airmen did that was right, and having the courage to do what's right regardless of what they thought could happen. They did the right thing without expecting an immediate reward.
With his leadership, a stretch of I-65 near Seymour was designated the Tuskegee Airmen Highway in 2016. He's offered to help guide Molinari's efforts on the statue project too. Tim's collected half the funds, but still has about $40,000 to go.
The story is much greater than just flying airplanes. It's about wanting to serve one's country for the purpose of attaining the greater benefits of what our country and Constitution have provided.
For Indiana Newsdesk, I'm Mitch Legan.
And with winter weather gripping the nation, people are still taking advantage of the outdoors. Videographer Joy Mendelia caught up with a pair of skaters recently at Griffey Lake.
The ice rink here in Bloomington has been closed since November. We've had to skate in Indianapolis, we've had to skate in Columbus. We've been waiting for a pond to freeze so that we could maybe skate somewhere closer to home. This is our first time. We tried to make it in before the snow starts up again. This one's quarantined now for school, so he can't be with his team practice, so we thought he's feeling good, so we brought him out for a little bit and getting his legs underneath him.
Just to get out here for maybe 30 minutes, skate around, get my legs back under me after being locked at home. It's a lot of fun, and it brings back some old memories. We used to live up in Geist, and back in 2010 we had a big ice storm, so for about a week I could skate in the backyard. So this kind of feels like that.
That's the end of this program, but our work continues online as we cover the news throughout the week at WTIUnews.org. Have a great weekend.
Indiana Newsdesk is made possible in part by Smithville Fiber Internet, streaming TV, home security and automation in Southern Indiana. More information at smithville.com. MALLOR GRODNER attorneys providing legal services to clients and the community. Understanding, expertise, results. Bloomington and Indianapolis. LawMG.com. IU Alumni Association connecting IU's network of alumni and sharing the Indiana spirit through scholarships, advocacy, and volunteerism. Alumni.iu.edu. IU Center for Rural Engagement, extending IU Bloomington resources to improve Hoosier lives in partnership with communities and organizations. Rural.indiana.edu. And by WTIU members. Thank you.